The moment I saw the water bubbling up through my backyard's grass like a busted fire hydrant, I knew it had to be Karren. Not just any Karren, the Karren. Karren Adler, HOA president of Meadow Lane Heights and self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. She was the kind of woman who wore pearls to mow her lawn and carried a clipboard like it was a loaded weapon. And for the past 6 months, she'd made my life hell. Name's Callum Westbrook. I'm a contractor, widower, and proud owner of one of the last original houses in this neighborhood, meaning it wasn't built by the HOA's pet developer. Karren never liked that. Said my non-conforming architecture made the street look unbalanced. I told her if symmetry was so important, maybe she should get her nose done to match her attitude. That didn't go over well. I was used to her nonsense. Bogus citations, threats about paint colors, letters about my truck being an eyesore. But this was another level. I stood there in work boots, ankle deep in water on my back lawn, watching the flood consume the garden I'd spent a year building. Tomatoes gone, mulch floating. My grill was half submerged, and I could hear the gurgle of water pushing up from the French drain I'd installed last fall. I followed the source of the flood, cutting through the side path between my house and Karren's. Her backyard was pristine, as always. Except this time, her pool pump was humming like a jet engine and water was gushing out of a white PVC pipe that had been rerouted straight into the slope between our yards. I knew what I was looking at. She'd redirected her pool backwash line. On purpose. I took a step back, heart pounding with that kind of fury that starts in your stomach and burns its way up. I hadn't done anything to this woman except exist. But she'd just declared war. I knocked on her door. No answer. I rang the bell. Nothing. I even shouted her name. I knew she was home. The Audi was parked out front, and her little yappy dog was scratching at the window like it saw a ghost. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. The squeak of the door opening behind me. "Oh, it's you," Karren said, arms crossed, hair shellacked into some kind of helmet. "I'm very busy right now. My yard is flooded," I said, fists clenched. "Your pool is draining straight into it." She raised an eyebrow like I'd just accused her of tax fraud. "I'm not responsible for the slope of the land. Maybe if you'd landscaped properly." "You rerouted the pipe?" I snapped. "You aimed it at my property." "I had to," she said, not even pretending to lie well. "The HOA didn't approve your drainage system, so technically, your yard isn't compliant. I'm just doing what's best for the neighborhood. You destroyed my garden." She rolled her eyes. "They were heirloom tomatoes, Callum. Not the Mona Lisa." I wanted to say a lot of things, some of them loud, most of them with enough force to leave her porch railing shaking. But I didn't. I walked away, not because I was backing down, but because I had a plan forming, and rage makes me creative. That night, I called my buddy Trey. He owns a concrete supply company. I told him I needed 500 pounds of quick-drying cement. Delivered. No questions asked. "You building a bunker?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. We met behind his warehouse. He loaded the bags into my truck, and I paid in cash. No paper trail. The next morning, I waited. I knew Karren's schedule better than I knew my own. Tennis at 7, brunch at 9, HOA inspection rounds at 11. She'd be gone for 4 hours minimum. I parked 2 blocks away and walked in through the side gate she always left unlocked because no one in this neighborhood steals. Her pool was beautiful. Crystal blue, lined with imported stone, and shaped like a teardrop. How poetic. I opened the cement bags one by one, pouring them into the water slowly, methodically. The chemicals started reacting immediately, bubbling up like a witch's brew. The water turned cloudy, then thick. I used a shovel to stir it around, making sure it reached every inch of that pool. By the time I was done, it looked like a swamp had swallowed her backyard. I left the shovel leaning against her flamingo-shaped pool float. Then I walked out the same way I came in. An hour later, I heard her scream. Not just any scream to scream. The sound of a woman who just realized her 6-figure water feature was now a solid block of gray concrete. I stepped onto my porch with a coffee in hand, just in time to see her stomping across the lawn in her tennis skirt and white visor, holding up her phone like it was a weapon. "You vandalized my property," she shrieked. "You flooded mine," I said calmly. "I'm calling the HOA board." "Go ahead. I'd love to see how you explain the illegal pipe you installed." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish gasping for logic. I pulled out my own phone. "Also, I have footage. Security cameras. Front and back. Including the pipe you installed last week." Want to see it? She didn't answer, just turned and stormed off, heels snapping against the concrete like gunshots. Later that day, I got a letter from the HOA. A formal complaint, citing me for unauthorized landscaping activity. The nerve. But I was ready. I filed my own complaint with the city. About her pool drainage. About the environmental hazard. About the structural damage to my property. And I wasn't the only one. Turns out, I wasn't her only victim. 3 other neighbors came forward after I made some quiet visits. One had their basement flooded. Another lost a retaining wall. We pooled our evidence, photos, videos, statements. Then I dropped it all off at the city inspector's office. A week later, Karren got an official visit from the Department of Environmental Protection. The same day, I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked outside her house. Funny how quickly she stopped doing inspections after that. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Because once we started digging, we found a whole lot more than just a pipe pointed in the wrong direction. 3 days after the environmental inspector's visit, a black Suburban with tinted windows rolled down Meadow Lane and parked in front of Karren's house. No one in this neighborhood drove anything larger than a compact SUV unless it had a logo on the side or a badge in the window. This one had both. 2 men stepped out, one in a gray suit with a rolled-up binder tucked under his arm, the other in a city-issued polo and cargo pants. They didn't knock. They just walked straight around to the side yard. A minute later, I heard something metallic snap, followed by the hollow clang of a sump line being yanked from the ground. By dusk, a bright orange placard was posted on her front door. I didn't need to read it from up close. The words "cease and desist" were printed large enough to be seen from my porch. Karren didn't come out for 2 days. On the 3rd morning, her husband, the silent, sunburned man who mostly existed to edge the lawn and gnawed at passing joggers, was seen lugging boxes out to the garage. Not moving boxes. Paperwork boxes. Banker's boxes. The kind that hold files. That's when I got curious. I wasn't planning to push things further. Honestly, I thought the flooded garden and ruined pool were a decent trade. But when a man starts hauling out documents like he's prepping for an audit, I pay attention. So I called Carol. Carol's a retired IRS agent who lives 2 houses down from me. She's the kind of woman who alphabetizes her spice rack and still wears pressed trousers to check the mailbox. Most people in the neighborhood call her that weird bird lady. I call her my secret weapon. I caught her while she was refilling the feeder in her backyard, surrounded by a half-dozen goldfinches and a squirrel who acted like it paid rent. You ever look into the HOA's financials? I asked. Carol didn't look up. Every year. Find anything interesting? She tilted her head. Depends. Are we talking about discrepancies or red flags? Let's start with the ones that get people indicted. She picked up a folder from her patio table and handed it to me like she'd been waiting. Inside were copies of cash flow statements, meeting minutes, and contract approvals. All public documents. All with one thing in common. The same 2 vendors popping up over and over again: Green Star Landscaping and Elite Property Management. Look familiar? She asked. Should they? They're owned by Karren's nephew. Registered under different holding companies, but the tax IDs link straight to his LLCs. She's been funneling contracts his way for 5 years. You sure? Pulled the EINs myself. Want me to dig deeper? Not yet, I said. Let me stir the waters a bit first. The next morning, I strolled into the HOA monthly meeting at the clubhouse. Normally, these things were ghost towns. Karren always scheduled them at 10 on a Tuesday, probably to make sure no working adult could attend. But this time, I brought company. Carol came, and so did Mr. Patel from across the street, the one whose retaining wall had collapsed. I even wrangled the Delgados, who'd been fined for planting a lemon tree. The meeting room had folding chairs, stale coffee, and a microphone that squealed every time someone breathed near it. Karren sat at the front table, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they hadn't said a word in public since the Clinton administration. She smiled when she saw me. It wasn't a friendly smile. Callum, she said, voice syrupy. Didn't expect you here. Thought you preferred vandalism to civic engagement. Thought I'd try something new, I said, handing out copies of Carol's binder to the people behind me. Her expression twitched. What are you doing? Sharing information. You know, transparency. It's in the bylaws. The room went quiet as people flipped pages. Mr. Patel pointed to a highlighted entry. She approved this contract herself? Carol nodded. Without a vote. The meeting notes say it passed unanimously, but there's no record of who was present. Which is odd, because I was on the board that month and I never saw this. Karren's smile vanished. She leaned forward, voice low. You're making a scene. We're making a point, I corrected. You've been awarding non-competitive contracts to a family member. That's self-dealing. And the city's about to start asking questions. Board member 1 cleared his throat. Karren, is this true? She didn't answer. She stood up, muttered something about defamation, and left the room. That night, the HOA website went offline. 2 days later, the financials page was replaced with a coming soon banner. By the end of the week, Carol told me someone had tried to access her tax records online. But she was 3 firewalls deep and flagged it before anything could be copied. She grinned like a poker player holding 4 aces. Someone's nervous, she said. I wasn't surprised. Karren had built her little empire on intimidation and paperwork. But now, the paperwork was biting back. I decided to take things further. I filed a formal complaint with the city's ethics commission. I didn't use my name. I used the neighborhood committees. Carol co-signed. So did 3 other residents, all with documented grievances tying back to Karren's selective enforcement policies. A week after we submitted it, 2 plainclothes investigators showed up at the clubhouse during a board meeting. They didn't knock. They walked in, flashed badges, and asked for all vendor contracts from the past 7 years. Karren wasn't there, but her husband was. He stammered, said he didn't know where the files were. They gave him 48 hours. 48 hours later, the clubhouse was locked. The windows dark. A hand-lettered sign read, "Closed for maintenance." That's when I called in a favor. My cousin Mara works for the county clerk's office. I asked her to pull property records not just for Karren's house, but for the 2 vendor companies. What she found made my stomach drop. Green Star Landscaping wasn't just overcharging for basic lawn care. They billed the HOA for projects that never happened. Entire irrigation systems that didn't exist. Mulch deliveries no one saw. Stone pavers installed on sidewalks that hadn't changed in 20 years. Worse, the payments didn't just go to Karren's nephew. Some were routed to a shell company registered in Nevada. Guess whose name was on the incorporation paperwork? Not her nephew. Hers. I shared the findings with the Ethics Commission. Mara made me promise to keep her name out of it, but she was grinning when she hung up. 3 days later, a city investigator showed up on my porch with a clipboard. We're building a case, he said. Would you be willing to testify if this goes to a hearing? Absolutely, I said. Also, he added, we're looking into campaign contributions. Did you know she donated nearly $10,000 to a city council candidate last year? She doesn't even vote in that district. Exactly. The next HOA meeting was packed. Standing room only. Karren didn't show. Instead, one of the board members stood up and read a prepared statement announcing her temporary leave of absence due to health concerns. The room broke into whispers. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The documents had done the talking for me. After the meeting, people came up. They shook my hand. They asked questions. They thanked me. But the best moment came when Mr. Delgado pulled me aside near the coffee urn. You know, he said, for a guy who keeps to himself, you sure know how to start a revolution. I shrugged. Sometimes, I said, you just need to pour a little cement in the right place to stop the leak. And the leak? Oh, it was just getting started. By the second week of Karren's so-called leave of absence, a strange silence settled over Meadow Lane Heights. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace, it means everyone's waiting for the next shoe to drop. Lawn still got mowed. Trash bins still went out on Thursdays, but nobody looked each other in the eye for too long. They were watching. Not just each other, me. I'd been branded a troublemaker by some, a hero by others. Either way, my name was now tied to the unraveling of the most feared woman in the subdivision. And that made me a target. It started small. My mailbox door was bent backward one morning. Could have been a fluke, sure. But then the next day, someone left a note wedged under my windshield wiper. No signature, just a typed sheet of paper with the words, "You'll regret this," in bold font. I didn't panic. I installed a second camera over the garage and angled it directly at the street. This time, I looped it to a cloud server and backed up the footage to an encrypted drive. If someone was going to escalate, I'd be ready. That same afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was low, clipped, and definitely not local. Is this Callum Westbrook? Depends who's asking. I represent a private law firm on retainer with Meadow Lane Heights Owners Association. We're conducting an internal review. You say represent, but I don't recall you stating your name. A pause, then a sigh, like he'd just realized I wasn't going to be bullied. Samuel Kincaid, partner at Kincaid, Royce & Bell. We're evaluating recent claims made against HOA leadership. We'd like to meet. Not interested. It would be in your best interest. That's funny, I said, because I'm pretty sure your client's best interest is about to be buried under a fraud investigation. The line went dead. Carol was less than thrilled when I told her about the call. They're not testing you, she said, sorting through a new stack of documents on her dining table. They're testing how much you know. I leaned over her shoulder. You find anything new? I traced the shell company in Nevada to a trust in Delaware. Guess whose name is on the beneficiary line? Please don't say the dog. Worse, her husband. Which means she's not just embezzling. She's laundering. I whistled, low and slow. You think she knows we're this far in? If she didn't before, she does now. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared. I just couldn't stop thinking. There was a pattern to all of it, a structure. Karren didn't make random moves. She was methodical, surgical. The pool pipe, the fines, the contracts, they were all pieces of a larger machine. And I finally understood what that machine was for. Control. Not just over lawns or fences, but over people. She'd built an ecosystem where fear kept residents compliant and confusion kept them quiet. Most folks didn't even know what the bylaws said. They just followed the letters that showed up in their mailboxes. And now that system had a crack in it. A loud, irreparable crack. I made my next move the following morning. I went to see Joseph Tran. Joseph lived in the last house on the cul-de-sac, the one with the solar panels and the closed-circuit intercom by the door. He was a tech consultant, semi-retired, and the only person in the neighborhood who'd ever challenged Karren in a board election and lost by a suspicious margin. He opened the door in slippers and a thermal shirt, blinking like he hadn't been outside in a week. You here for coffee or revenge? Little of both. He stepped aside. His living room was lined with filing cabinets and an old drafting table covered in blueprints. I didn't ask why. I just handed him a flash drive. What's on it? He asked. Surveillance footage. From my cameras. I think someone's been targeting my property. He loaded it into his desktop and started scrubbing through the files. It didn't take long. Pause it, I said. A grainy black and white frame showed a silhouette creeping across my driveway at 2:13 in the morning, hooded, with something in his hand. The next frame showed him slipping a sheet of paper under my wiper. Joseph zoomed in. Well, that's not Amazon. You recognize him? He squinted, then shook his head. But I recognized the walk. That guy's ex-military. Probably Army. Watch his gait, left foot heavy, right foot rolls. I think I know who that is. There was only one man in the neighborhood who flew a faded POW MIA flag and drilled his own mailbox post into the concrete with a power auger. Doug Penner. Doug was also one of the board's former security committee members. He'd been Karren's muscle for years, always the first to file noise complaints or issue parking warnings. But he'd laid low since her leave of absence until now. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. Instead, I printed the footage, 3 frames per page, and assembled a little booklet. On the cover, I wrote, "Is this who we want protecting our neighborhood?" Then I dropped 20 copies anonymously into mailboxes up and down the block. By the next evening, Doug's flag was gone. He didn't show up to the next board meeting either. That meeting, by the way, was chaos. With Karren out, the remaining members tried to assert control. They failed. The room was packed, not just with residents, but with 2 local reporters and a representative from the city's ethics commission. Everyone wanted answers. The board could only offer confusion. I raised my hand. They ignored me. So I stood. Why hasn't the HOA provided an updated financial report? I asked. Why were contracts routed through unregistered vendors? Why does the current board refuse to answer questions about ongoing investigations? One of the board members, a guy named Gil who always wore 2 tight polos and looked like a middle manager at a failing car dealership, tried to shut me down. These accusations have no basis. You're not under oath yet, Gil, but you might want to start practicing. He turned red. Someone in the back snorted. Carol tapped her watch. I pulled out a folder from my coat. Inside were notarized petitions, 50 signatures. Enough to trigger a special election per the HOA's own charter. I handed them to the secretary. This is a formal motion to dissolve the current board and initiate a full audit, I said. Effective immediately. You could feel the shift in the room. People started whispering, nodding, even clapping. Carol stood beside me. Joseph, too. The Delgados. Mr. Patel. Even the couple who'd just moved in 3 weeks ago and hadn't unpacked their silverware yet. The board didn't adjourn the meeting. They fled it. 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single check. Made out to me. For $500. Signed by Green Star Landscaping. I brought it to Carol. This is a bribe, she said, holding it with tongs. I figured. We can use it. How? Because it proves they think you're a threat worth paying off. We made copies. Sent one to the Ethics Commission. One to the city attorney. One to the local news outlet that had been sniffing around the HOA's finances. And then we waited. What came next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. A subpoena was issued. Then another. The HOA's bank statements were frozen pending review. The clubhouse was padlocked by city order. Karen's husband was seen loading framed certificates and photo albums into the back of a rental van at 6 in the morning. They didn't say goodbye. They just left. The neighborhood didn't celebrate. There were no parties. No speeches. Just a quiet sort of relief, like a pressure valve had finally released. Joseph volunteered to serve as interim president until the election. Carol agreed to oversee the audit. I declined any official position. I just wanted my garden back. And maybe some peace. One evening, about a week after things settled, I came home to find a basket on my porch. Inside, a bottle of bourbon, a hand-drawn thank you card from the Delgado kids, and a note. No name. Just 4 words. Thanks for standing up. I poured a glass, went out to the backyard, and looked at the spot where the grass had started to grow back. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And no one, not Karen, not her cronies, not a clipboard-carrying army of rule enforcers was going to take that from me again. Spring rolled in on Meadow Lane Heights like a sigh of relief. The air smelled like cut grass and wet bark. Kids were chalking up sidewalks again, and the tension that used to hum beneath every HOA meeting had finally burned off like morning fog. But the battle scars were still visible if you knew where to look. Empty flower beds where inspections used to dictate color palettes. Faded signs on the clubhouse doors, peeling from disuse. And the lot next to mine, where Karen's perfect pool once gleamed under a mosaic of LED lights, now sat dry and cracked, quietly crumbling under the weight of its own cement tomb. None of us had seen her since she left. No moving truck, no formal notice. Just the Audi gone one day and a for sale by owner sign crookedly hammered into her front lawn 2 weeks later. The house sat vacant, curtains drawn, mailbox stuffed with flyers. I hadn't gone anywhere, but I had changed. I put up a new fence taller, reinforced, and, for once, entirely up to code. I dug a proper French drain trench that redirected water far from any neighbor's yard. And I planted again. Not tomatoes this time. Peppers. Hardy. Resilient. The kind that thrived in heat and didn't care who tried to drown them. One Saturday morning, I was sanding a new deck board when Joseph showed up with a folder tucked under his arm and a look on his face like he'd just cracked a safe. "You busy?" he asked. "Just making something level for once in this neighborhood." He handed me the folder. "That audit? It's done." I wiped my hands on a rag and flipped it open. Inside were spreadsheets, scanned receipts, and a summary page that read like a crime novel's final chapter. Over $70,000 in misappropriated funds. Kickbacks disguised as beautification initiatives. Even a private cleaning service billed quarterly, supposedly for clubhouse sanitation, but actually servicing Karen's home twice a month. "They're recommending full restitution," Joseph said. "And criminal referrals." I closed the folder. "She'll never step foot here again." "She won't have to. The state's taking it from here." He paused, then added, "We also voted." "You're getting something." I didn't run for anything. Not a position. A commendation. The board passed a resolution naming you as the neighborhood's community advocate. I blinked. "That's not a thing." "It is now." I laughed, for the first time in weeks without bitterness hanging on the edge of it. "Tell me I don't have to give speeches. Just don't flood anyone's yard, and you're golden." That evening, I walked the perimeter of my property, checking the new floodlights I'd installed along the back hedges. I'd mounted them higher than necessary, not for security, but because I liked the way the light fell on the pepper plants. Warm. Steady. I wasn't expecting company, but I heard the gate creak open behind me. I turned and saw Marisol Delgado stepping through, her youngest son tagging along behind her with a rubber ball under one arm. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, glancing around. "You're fine. Gate's never locked." She hesitated, then added, "We're organizing a block dinner. Something informal. Picnic tables, potluck, maybe even a grill if someone volunteers." I raised an eyebrow. "You need a grill guy." She smiled. "And someone who can keep the HOA from charging us for using the sidewalks. I think I can manage." As they left, her son ran back and pressed a small sticker into my hand. It was shaped like a chili pepper, with a cartoon face and sunglasses. I wasn't sentimental, but I kept it in my back pocket the rest of the night. The following week, a new couple moved into Karen's old house. Their names were Simon and Rachel. Young, newly married, quiet but friendly. They waved when they saw me outside, and Rachel brought over a tin of lemon biscuits on their third day. "I heard you're the guy to talk to about what this neighborhood's really like," she said, glancing around the porch like she was checking for hidden microphones. "I used to be the guy everyone avoided," I said. "Now I just keep the lights on." She laughed. "Well, if you ever need help fixing anything, Simon's a plumber." "Good to know," I said, already thinking of 3 rusted valves I hadn't touched in years. Later that month, we held the block dinner. No permits. No HOA memos. Just tables lined with mismatched dishes, a cooler full of sodas, and music playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker. It felt normal. Not the kind of normal that's forced or scheduled. The kind you don't realize you've been missing until it's back. Carol brought a lemon meringue pie and wore a sunnet shaped like a gladiolus bloom. Joseph grilled hot dogs with surgical precision. The Patel twins set up a cornhole tournament and kept score like it was the Olympic trials. I stood near the grill for most of it, soaking in the laughter, the low hum of conversation, the absence of clipboards. At one point, Rachel wandered over and asked, "So, what really happened with the last HOA president?" I passed her a plate. "You ever see a chessboard where someone flips the table instead of losing?" She nodded slowly. "Now imagine someone filling that table with cement first." She laughed, and then said, "Sounds like there's a story." There was. But that part's over now. And it was. The HOA still existed, technically, but it no longer ruled. The board had been trimmed down, the rules simplified, and the budget made public. Meetings were held at reasonable hours, and attendance had tripled. People actually spoke, and more importantly, they listened. One morning, a letter arrived, postmarked from out of state. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a single line on a blank sheet of paper. "You think you won, but this isn't over." I tossed it in the compost bin and went back to installing the rainwater collection system I'd been planning since winter. Because that's the thing about people like Karren. They think power is permanent. That fear is a currency with no inflation. But once neighbors stop whispering and start talking, once people realize the rules are just ink on paper, the whole foundation shifts. And sometimes, when that foundation cracks wide enough, you don't just fix it. You rebuild it. From the ground up. With concrete if necessary.